Rabbi Zechariah's leadership school and a bunch of things. But it's been great. So what I've done, though, is over all that time, I've just written down the cream of the crop of each one. I just looked at each one and said, what is this that's trying to say? What's the overview of this? Because you know how it is. Sometimes some of those things, once you've read one of them, you can say, I've read all of them, and there's a bunch of them that are the same. I'm going to be honest with you, but what I've done is I've just kind of taken the best of each one, and I want to try to give that to you. So we're going to talk about things like visioneering, and we're going to talk about things like extreme ownership. We're going to talk about a lot of cool things. We're even going to get some paperwork out here and do some things, some deep thinking about our lives, our finances, everything. We're just going to kind of take a step back and start working on ourselves individually and as couples, okay? So is that good? I hope so, because we're just going to dive off deep into it. Tonight we're going to talk about extreme ownership, and it's a neat thing that I've learned over the last little bit, and I'll kind of tell you where that's based out of in just a minute. But we've kind of had a mandate from God. He tells us to occupy until I come. Okay, we like to say that when election time comes around. We always want to preach that scripture. He told us to occupy until we come. You know, we got to stand up and be that voice and be accounted for. But it's true in everyday life. We have a chance to be leaders in our homes. God's called us to go into all the world and preach the gospel, to lead people to Jesus. So leadership is a big deal, and it's big to me. We're going to be dealing with productivity and leadership in our individual lives. So for today, all right, extreme ownership. This was some ideas that I got from a book written by a Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink. I don't know if you've ever seen Fox News, where they have a couple of different Navy SEALs come on there. This is the scary-looking one. I mean, he's bald-headed. His ears just completely rolled up into a saucer. He retired from the Navy SEALs and went and won Jiu-Jitsu World Championship. He said, I had nothing else to do, so I just won the championship. And I'm like, he's just one of those kind of guys. When he talks, you're like, rah, 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 rah. You're like, yes, that guy loved his job, okay? And so he says, from time to time, I like to take a break and go on vacation. I go train SEALs when I go on vacation. I said, Lord have mercy. This guy has nothing to do in his life. But he wrote a book about his time in Ramadi, Afghanistan. And in this, while he was in that province of Al-Ramadi, maybe you've heard of Chris Kyle and different people like that. A lot of Navy SEALs, they were underneath his command in that mission. And so he lost 2 guys under his command, and another guy was in another battalion that was a close friend of his. He jumped on a grenade to save about 6 or 7 other guys. And so he just says, we got a lot of experience in the heat of battle. And and in the book, he tells you a lot about that. But he starts off the book with this great story of his failure. And I thought that was great, because most of the time, everybody in these leadership books that I read, they always like to tell you exactly what they've done right. I brought this company to this point. I've done this in my life. And this guy starts off his book and he says, hey, I'm a failure. And people's lives were lost. And I was like, immediately I went, this resonates with me, because you know what? I resonate with being a failure. I know what it's like. Let's just be real about life. We don't make the best decisions all the time. And he tells this story about going with an Army Ranger group, URF, their quick response force, to a scene of a building where some Marines are held down. I mean, they're in this intense battle with these people in this building. I mean, they're talking about an intense battle. They've got an Abrams tank outside, and their Marines are firing in, and the Army is just now pulling up, and the second SEAL team is pulling up to this building, and they're taking a heavy fire. And he said, what's going on? He goes, man, there's some Afghanis in that building, and they are giving us all that we can handle. Everything we've got, we've thrown at them. These guys have got to be the best of their best. He says, well, tell me what happened. He goes, we went in the room. We have some of the Afghan soldiers with us that we've trained. And as we went in, one of them took one to the chest. And so we all backed out. We called you guys. We've been in an intense fight for about 45 minutes with them. And he goes, something strange here. He says, We got the Abrams here now, so if you want to, we'll just clear out. We'll bring this entire building down. He said, just give me a minute. And he says he goes into the door, and he kicks the door open, and he yells in, hey, who's in here? And there was another SEAL team in there. And they're going, what are you doing here? He goes, the enemy's out there. Get in there. He says, man, you're fighting the Marines. And the guy goes, what? And he goes, you killed an Afghan soldier that's on our side. And the guy comes downstairs, and it was one of his snipers. And he goes, oh, man. He goes, there was a blue on blue. You just killed one of our own people. And he goes, this is the worst thing that can happen. He says, in Vietnam, SEAL Team 1 had a team that split up, and they surrounded a Vietnam camp. And when they came in, they killed the enemy so fast, they didn't know that they ran into each other. They just basically cut the enemy in half, came right in and started killing each other. And he says that they were called Unit X-ray. He says now there are no Unit X-rays in the entire military because of that unit, because that was a bad symbol. That's got a bad omen on it. We don't even use that term for teams anymore. And he goes, man, we're the first team since 1971 that has killed somebody in the Navy SEALs. And they're going, oh, man. So they go back, and, of course, he said before he even got to base, his commanders in Washington are calling him. He goes, that's how news travels. He says, good news, it goes slow. Bad news, it goes really fast. And the guys are giving him grief. They're going, great, you know what? We're going to be on Fox News and CNN in the morning because you messed up and killed one of the Afghanistan soldiers. He goes, everybody's off duty right now. Everything's going to be off until we get investigated. He's going, oh, man. I mean, it just puts us behind. He goes, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to lose my command. Somebody else is going to come in here. They just don't play with this kind of stuff. And so they had a meeting. He got everybody together. He got the Army. He got the Marines. He got the SEAL team that was there. He got his SEAL team, and he brought everybody into the building. And he started saying, okay, where did we go wrong? People started chiming in. Man, we messed up. We didn't follow this protocol when we got there. We started shooting. The SEALs go, man, it's our fault. We saw a guy with an AK-47 coming in, and we go, you U.S. soldiers aren't carrying AK-47s. We didn't put our eyes on target. We shot them. And he goes, and one after another, people just began to explain to them their failure, their failure, their failure, their failure, their failure. And he's like, whose fault is it? They're like, it's mine. He's like, no. Whose fault is it? And they're like, it's mine. One group after another, he says, no. I'm in charge here. It's my fault. He said, because here's the reality. When it comes to extreme ownership, it's always the person who's in charge's fault. You could have been trained better. Listen, there was something that we missed. If you didn't follow that protocol, it's because I didn't train you good enough to follow that protocol. And so what he didn't know was one of the big brasses was listening in from outside from Washington. He had already flown all the way in to come there, and he listened to this, and he goes, you know what? This is the kind of guy I need on the ground here, because I guarantee you he's not going to make this mistake ever again. And so he learned from that, and he says there's something that you can do no matter who you are or what you've been through. The buck stops with you. This is kind of the eat crow lesson for the whole series, okay? Because here's what we need to do. We need to eat a little crow every now and then. If something's gone wrong, if something's gone crazy at work and crazy at home and crazy in your finances and crazy with your parenting skills, quit looking at everybody else to point a finger at and try to figure out whose fault it could be. Start looking at yourself. It's the first rule in leadership is, you know what? If I'm a leader, the buck stops here. I'm the guy that has to take responsibility for what just happened. I have a great quote up here. It's Harold J. Smith. He says this: more people would learn from their mistakes if they weren't so busy denying them. I thought, what a statement. If they're not so busy denying them or trying to cover them up. I mean, look, you turn on Fox News and all you see is one mistake after another that somebody's trying to cover up, because the rule in politics is you never admit to a failure. And I'm like, wait a minute, when did it get to that point? Because character tells us that you always admit to failures, that you always do the right thing. So, in any team or any organization, all the responsibility of success and failure rests in the leader. Doesn't matter who that is. So, the leader must own everything. No one else is to blame. Like even me, Sunday, when a word of the Lord came, I mean, to me, to say something to James and to Ed, if you were in here, I don't do that. I don't ever, if I got something to say to somebody, God gives me a word from somebody, I pull them apart, aside, and I tell them. And God goes, I want you to tell them now. So I begin to tell them. I'm going to tell you what, in here, it was kind of dead. If you didn't notice that. Worship, guys, we gotta come alive and worship God. It was like, I mean, it was terrible in here Sunday. You've been there before, right? I'm not blaming you, me. It's just the whole everything was just. I was like, what is going on? I'm over here started preaching, and I'm like, smile, give me a little look. Everybody was like, oh man. But it was amazing. God says, I want you to tell them what I'm telling you right now, and so I do. And right then, man, you can see a change happen, and people are like, all right, oh, man, we're getting real in here now, okay? I come over here and I speak something to Ed, and then God goes, tell him what I told you to. I'm like, no. You know what I did? I began to admit a failure. I began to tell you, you know what? I'm not doing as good at this job as I should. For everybody. That's a hard pill to swallow. And then God's going, there's something he's been telling me. You know what he's been telling me? Where are all the things I told you to do? All the things that you've done for years. You know? Why would you march around Jericho 6 times and on the 7th time stop? Don't stop before the miracles happen. Don't stop before, and so I have to admit that. But what's neat is I'm fixing to preach on leadership coming up next Wednesday, and God's going, this is perfect time. Because I'll be honest with you, he's been telling me something. He goes, I need you to be proactive. I need you to be proactive. That's just a word he's given me. I need you to be proactive. And so when we made the transition, I came in here the first month, and I kind of had a different style of preaching and different types, and I was handing out papers and flyers, and people were filling them out, and people were going, it's a little crazy. I hope this isn't how church is going to go with a new pastor. And I got the hint because people were looking at me like, what are you handing me this paper for? Why don't you just open your Bible and preach, And so I went back, all right, Lord, what are we doing here? This is some good stuff. And he's like, you just need to take this little moment right here and let this year go by and just preach and just do this. But I want you to be proactive on how you look at other things. And so when that year came up, I was ready to go by that first week. I'm ripping and raring and going in January and February, and then I kind of run out of steam, and I kind of like the ease that I had before. But that's not what he has for me. And so you know what I have to do? I have to look at myself as the leader and go, you're not doing everything you're supposed to do, everything you've been told to do. So maybe you're going, why are you telling me this? Because I want to be completely transparent with you that I am a leader of this church. I am the leader that God has placed here. And I'm looking at you and saying, I've got to work on myself. So when I'm preaching to you, telling you need to work on yourself, don't think that we're not in the same boat. Right? If I ever stop learning and try to lead, you need to get somebody else for this job. Because what I've done is I've stopped growing. So that's the only reason I want to come down here and say that, because for the next couple weeks, or maybe even months, there's going to be a lot of things thrown out there, a lot of quotes that are good about leadership. But take something, and when it speaks to you, don't let go of it, okay? When it sticks to you, let it stick to you. Take that extreme ownership and say, you know what? This is going to be mine. I've got to live this way. In Mark chapter number 8, it's pretty funny that I put these together months apart, and it comes up the same story that I preached about Sunday. Jesus and his disciples went to the village around Caesarea Philippi, and he asked them, who do men say that I am? Some of them say that you're John the Baptist. Some of them say you're Elijah. Some of them say you're Jeremiah, one of the prophets. But then he asked them that very important question. He says, who do you say that I am? And again, I know we talked about this Sunday. I'm not trying to preach that message over to you. But the point is that God is worried about what you think, and you're responsible for what you think. He doesn't care about what everybody else thinks. He does, but individually, he cares about what you think. Okay? Because he doesn't care about they. Well, they said. We always say the sway of they. I don't know who they are, but they got some pull. You know what I'm talking about. Your kid comes to you, well, they said, well, who are they? It's like usually one person. Well, there's a lot of folks been talking about it. Like who? John and, Bobby, whatever. That's two people. Who are they, right? They have a lot of pull. God says, I don't care who they are. I care who you are. Who do you think I am? See, God is in the business of pulling up extreme ownership. He wants us to know that if you're going to do something, if you're going to live this life, you need to own it. It's your responsibility. It's your baby. Live it, do it, breathe it, but be fully in charge knowing this on your life, knowing this, that it comes down to me and my decision. Me and my decision. Listen, if we listen to God or don't listen to God, you know what he gives us a chance to do? To make a decision, to make a choice. He says to us, I give you two choices, life and death. And he tells you, I hope, basically one of them he says, I wish that you would choose life. Another one says, oh, that you would choose life. One's in Chronicles and one's in Proverbs, both, and one's in Deuteronomy. They all say the same thing. He sets before us those two choices. We get choices. Okay? We have to make decisions. And if we make the wrong decision, all I'm saying is stand up and say that I did it. Because we often look at people's success and we kind of attribute that to the luck or the culture that was around them. Well, they can't help but make it good. Look at what they've got. I mean, okay, you just take somebody that's in the public side. Who is the most public scrutinized person in the world right now? Okay, Donald Trump, okay? Donald Trump. Donald Trump has made successes probably on some things that are not good, but he's made some successes, right? And people go, well, of course he had to be successful. He got $1 million loan to start. If I had $1 million loan, I'd be successful. But he turned $1 million into $4 billion. Okay? But everybody, he did okay along the way. That's not because of the atmosphere he was around. He made some good choices. He made choices that were going to make him more money. And most of the time, we like to blame why people are successful on things that are just happen chance. And we do the same thing with failures. Well, it's really not my fault. It was just how I was brought up. It's just, how was I ever going to do a successful business in Bonifay? Right? No one's going to ever have a successful restaurant in Bonifay. Well, M&W does good. They got 3 days off. There's something there. You got to look at it. You got to pay attention. Somebody is making good decisions along the way. We have to own them. I've seen some places and some businesses do really good. Really good. And I've seen some do really bad. And I've asked in both cases, what went wrong or what went right? And every single case, do you know what it came down to? Leadership. They always say, well, when it came down to it, I just think it was bad management. I know a business that's around this area somewhere that made $600,000 in 1 year and went out of business. Okay, how many of you in here make $600,000 a year? Okay, you get where I'm going with this? And then go bankrupt. Bad management. Well, it was my workers. It was it was the staff. It was bad management. You got to take that extreme ownership and say, you know what? That poor performance was because of me. So total responsibility for failure is a difficult thing to accept. Right? It is. It's a difficult thing to accept. I'm going to tell you a leadership story, and I won't just do it just because it's my dad, but it's something that I saw firsthand. My dad, he worked on base. He just retired. 40 years, 42 years, 36 of it from the same company. And while he was there, he worked on his trade. He became a master electrician, and he started getting bidding jobs on base. Well, of course, he was also in the union, and eventually they kind of booted him out of his own thing because they go, it's kind of conflict of interest, because you're a boss out here and you're getting jobs. And he's like, right, okay, whatever. So he started a business during that boom when all the houses were being built. And man, they were putting up houses. At one time, I think he said he did 200 houses or 300 houses in a year. I can't remember what it was in pace. And it was just booming. Anderson Lane over there, Stonebrook, all that was getting big, and he was just building. And man, we were going on vacations where we want to go. I remember when Christmas was, you'll get what you'll get. To like, wow, I remember, where did all this stuff come from? I remember his success. And I remember when that market bottomed out. He still had his own job. He never quit the job that he worked in. He just managed some things. And one of his employees basically began to do jobs on the side and use his material and was getting paid, and the business wasn't getting paid. And I remember my dad paying money out of the savings account for that business to keep his employees. He kept doing that for a while, and you know how that begins to hurt the business, and you don't want to let anybody go. And then he found out that somebody was using the material that he had, and then once he found out, he let the guy go, and the guy never went back and finished those people's jobs. Okay, you know what my dad did? He went and finished the jobs. And I was like, why didn't you go punch that guy in the face? I'm just being honest with you, okay? Let's just be cryptic a little bit, sorry. And he's like, that's not how you do it. He says, I'll finish this up, I'll close that up, and if I need to, my name will still be good. Anytime I want to go into business, I'll have a good name. And he looked at me and he said, a good name is better sometimes than money. I said, I think I heard that before, somewhere in the Bible. That always stuck with me. He did everything right. He paid his taxes. She said, man, self-employment is just like getting stabbed in the back every quarter. Some of y'all understand what that's like. But I saw it with my own eyes, and he took that ownership of that, and he said, you know what? It was my fault because that guy was under my leadership. He went and he got him another. He stayed at that job. He got a job doing planning and estimating for the government, and the government went on a shutdown the first day on the job, and he was first 3 weeks he had no job for the first time in 36 years, and on his first day of his new job. So he went, I think I made a mistake, but it all worked out, and he's retired now, and he's outside hitting blacksmithing and fishing and doing whatever he wants to right now. But he has a good name, and he made right decisions. So you got to take responsibility for failure, and that's a difficult thing. But taking ownership of something, of our wrongs, requires extraordinary, just humility that's beyond our years. It's the courage to step out and say, you know what? I'm going to make it right. I'm going to do the right thing no matter what's going on. You remember Adam and Eve, right? God said, what happened? And Adam said, it's the woman you gave me. The woman goes, it's the snake. The snake was like, I don't know, it was the devil. That's what we do so many times. Listen, we've all been there, so I'm not gonna say that some of you have been to the place where you've done this, where somebody questioned you and you passed a buck or you threw somebody under the bus. Because guess what? Most everybody in this room has done that. And after a while, you start to learn that's not how you do it. You take it. Because a lot of times what you do is you lie about it, and then you go back and you go, oh, I'm going to hurry up and get this done. That starts a path that the Bible says leads to destruction. Because if you keep that up, you start doing it all the time because you found out it worked one time maybe, but God will tell you at the end of it, none of it worked. It didn't work. Because people behind the scenes, they realize that you lied to them and they don't trust you anymore. So whatever it is, if it's whatever's going on in your house, if it's to deal with your wife, your husband, your children, guess what? You have to take responsibility. It's you're in the leadership of what's going on. And so I don't want to tell you all the secrets of my family on everything I do, but here recently we've been going, guys, what have you been reading in the Bible? What's going on? Because we used to sit down always and have Bible study every night, but I'm trying to stretch them where they'll do it themselves. And I'm like, what are you reading? Well, I was reading, I'm like, don't be lying to me now. What have you been reading? Last night I studied for that test and I fell asleep. I got plenty of excuses. I said, okay. And one time they tried to get smart with me. Someone's like, well, what are you reading? I was like, well, I'm reading Matthew chapter number 9. Last night I read this, and they're like, all right, I haven't been reading. Busted. But you know what you got to do? You gotta take it and you gotta look at it. You say, I'm responsible for what goes on in this house. I'm responsible for my marriage. I'm responsible for my job. I'm responsible for my character. I'm responsible for that. So the first thing is we got to take extreme ownership, and we got to learn that it's about the mission. Getting that mission accomplished. Our mission as a church is go into all the world and preach the gospel. Tell the good news. And we start asking ourselves, am I doing that? Guess what we've got to have? Extreme ownership. So the first thing was we got to have extreme ownership. The second thing is there's no bad teams, just bad leaders. Some of you go, no, I've been on some bad teams. But you know what I've learned? I've seen some coaches that you can give them ragamuffins and they'll turn them into something. I've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen guys. You remember Coach Todd, don't you, out there, Nick? You can give Coach Todd a handful of reprobates, and they be playing basketball in the season. He was a good coach. I played for a guy. He had 700. Right now, he's got 790-something wins. They let him come out. He's out of retirement, and he's helping coaching the girls at Central High School now. He coached the boys for 30 years. That's a lot of wins. And I'm telling you what, I played on a team where we were awful, and we won 20 games. There's something when you give a good leader. I always joke about it. Oh, Coach Miles down there, his winning percentage is like 89%. I mean, the guy just wins. Just does. I don't know how he does. You give him all short girls, he wins. You give him all tall girls, he wins. He just wins. He just got it figured out. Coach Alford, PDL, same way. He just knew what to do. I was reading, there's actually I got a quote right here. John Quincy Adams, he says, if your actions inspire others to dream more and learn more and do more and become more, you are a leader. In a story in the book I was reading, they had a great story about some guys at Coronado that were training to be SEALs, and every year they begin to take a new group and begin to refine them and train them. And they have these boats. You ever seen the rafts they call them Zodiacs? They torture these kids with these boats, man. It's awesome. You should see it. But they train these guys to become machines. And in some of their training, they start to notice that one of these teams, they do these races where they go out and race around these pillars and hit the surf, and they got to go out and make this point. It's 1.2 miles out, and they got to be back on the shore. They got to go do an obstacle course carrying the Zodiac on their heads, not touching it, just running with it all on their heads, okay, the whole team. And they make these races, and they say, hey, it pays to be a winner. It pays to be a winner because if you win, you get to sit out the next race. And they all huddle together. They do. They all grab each other and sit down in a big ball together because they're freezing because it's so cold out there. And they said they'll take that any day than doing that race again. And they noticed that this team 2, there were 6 teams, and team 2 just kept winning and kept winning and kept winning and kept winning. And then they didn't just get good at it. They got great at it. They didn't just start winning. They started blowing everybody out. They also said this, that team 6 over there began to stink it up. They came in last. They came in last, and they started falling further and further behind. And you don't want to be last place. I mean, after everybody's over, they get the water hose out, and they get you down to push-up position, spray you in the face, put your face in the mud, push-up position. Give me 100 push-ups, and they're spraying you in the water hose, and like, how are they ever going to win? They were talking about that, man. Either we're going to cut these guys or something's going to have to change. They said, why don't we do something? Why don't we take the leader from team 2 and put them on team 6 and just swap them? They go, man, you want to do that to team 2? They've been working so hard. He goes, let's do it. He says, they need to overcome adversity. In battle, that team leader may get killed, and they have to have somebody step up in this place. Let's give them somebody else. And so they switched them. They said team 2 stayed pretty good because what happened was once you've had a good leader and he's rubbed off on you, you begin to take that role on your own and you begin to just live up above your potential. And they came in second every time. But eventually that team 6 that got that leader from team 2 began to win race after race after race. And they were going, what happened? And so they had the guys who are going, what happened? And the guys went, this guy got in here and he looked at us. He goes, listen, guys, we stink. There's nowhere to go but up. You're going to get better or you're going to get cut. So get with it or get gone. All right? He goes, quit bickering, quit blaming each other. You guys have stunk. You've been in last place. He goes, I'm not going to be last place. Either you're going to get out of here or you're going to do better. And they all began to pick up a paddle and they began to do better. And that guy stepped in and began to lead. And he took ownership that we stink, but we're not going to stink. We're going to get better. And so that begins to pay off once we realize there's no bad teams, just bad leaders. Here's the thing, the most important thing right here is that he believed that winning was possible. We've got to get to that place in our life that we believe that we can win again. We've gotten so beat down that we are always going to be failures, that we do not surprise ourselves. We fulfill that prophecy every time. That's not what God has said about us. When we talked about Sunday being the biggest loser, he says, you lose so you can win. I become last so I can be first. And I realize that I got to die to myself. Mark 8:31, it says, then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. And he spoke plainly about this. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. We know this, right? But when Jesus, this is what I love about Mark's rendition of it and his take of it and what happened. Verse 33, it says, but when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. Get behind me, Satan, he said. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. Peter takes him aside, okay? And he starts saying, this will never happen. You can't do this. And it says that Jesus is looking at Peter, and then he turns and he looks at everybody else. Okay? This is what happens to us a lot. We only see what's in front of us. We only see what we're facing. And what Jesus did is he turned and he looked at the mission. He looked at what was left. This is the world that I have to come and save. These are everybody else. I understand Peter's telling me this, but he turns and he looks at all the rest of his disciples too. And he turns and looks back at Peter and says, get behind me, Satan. It's not all about you. He's a good leader. Because even in the end, you know what Peter did? He followed him. The day of Pentecost, guess who preached that message? Peter. He realized something about Jesus, that he was the right leader. And Peter realized that he was not a good leader. Because right after that, Jesus looked Peter in the eyes and says, you must deny yourself. Take up my cross. Take up your cross and follow me. So the first thing is you got to have extreme ownership. The second thing is there's no bad teams, only bad leaders. And the third thing is that you have to believe in the cause. You have to believe in the mission. You have to believe in what it is that's in front of you. You have to be a believer. Ralph Waldo Emerson said this: shallow men believe in luck. Strong men believe in cause and effect. They believe in cause and effect. They believe that when they step up and do something, that they can change a thing. To change something, we got to be a true believer in the mission. Let me explain this one to you. It's a great story. I've shared it once before, and it was before they went in for the raid on bin Laden. I kind of shared this story with you about what went wrong and everything like that. But I want to hone in on a story again that took place right before they went in. Actually, the man who shot bin Laden was talking. He was a team leader, and he was talking to another guy as they go in. And this guy's the point man. He's the guy, once they blow the door, he's the first guy through the door. He goes, we don't know what's really behind this door. Suicide vest. We don't know what's about to happen. He goes, we're walking into a suicide. And that guy goes, yeah, probably. He goes, man, I left my wife and kids to come here and die for this. And he goes, which is common. We have these conversations where we have to psych ourselves up before we go into this. And he goes, you've got to understand what's happening. He goes, man, who are we doing this for? He said, man, we're doing this for that single mom from New Jersey. And he's like, what? You know, she went and bought tickets for her son to go watch the Yankees game. Because, you know what? He had been doing good in school. He had stayed out of fights. His grades had gone up. In 2 years, he had made A honor roll. In a town, in a situation that he shouldn't have been in, you know, that she couldn't get him out of, but she was trying her best, and he was trying his best, and she was going to reward him. The guy goes, okay. He goes, man, you don't get it. She never got the chance. She burned to death at 1,800 degrees on 9/11 in the North Tower. He goes, that's why we're going in this building. He goes, you understand? He goes, copy. First one in the door. I went, man. You got to be a believer in the mission. He said, I looked at that mission and went, we may all die. I may never see my wife again. I may never see my kids again. This may never come to nothing. We may fail. He said, I had to come to terms with myself that it was worth something. He said, I had to think about it. I began to think about it. And he goes, you know what I was doing? I was walking around thinking, man, what are we going to do? And he goes, it was 9/11. And I turned on History Channel. And I watched the buildings fall down over and over and over again, hour after hour. And he said, I can't wait to suit up and go. I went, man, that's a true believer in the mission. God has given us a mission, right? You and I, in our homes, in our marriages, in our jobs, wherever we're at, He's given us a mission. We just got to become true believers in the cause. We got to become true believers in that what He says can happen, and it does go, and it is right. And once we click into that, and we begin to take extreme ownership, and we realize that the leader that we're following does not make mistakes, that we're on a winning team, then we can believe in the cause. And once we do that, we become, in a sense, unstoppable in a way. Because when something bumps up against us, we turn and we look at what the mission's all about. We don't just look at the problem and get blinded by the situation. David stood before Goliath, and he's like, man, you stand in front of me with a shield and with a spear and with a sword, but I come at you with the name of the Lord God Almighty. You're just in my way. I came to give my brother some cheese and some bread, some pizza, okay? Whatever, but you're in my way. Get out of our way. He believed in the mission. What I love about it is he was already anointed to be king. He didn't see the situation in front of him and back down. He was looked around and said, I remember God said I was going to be king of that land. You're in the way. We got to become true believers in that cause and in that mission, what God has called us to do. Leaders must always operate with the understanding they are a part of something greater than themselves and their own personal interest. They must impart an understanding to their teams, down to the people on the ground. Everybody needs to know from the top down what it is that I expect of you. In many cases, the leader must align his thoughts and visions to that of the mission. So at the end of it, when they're looking, they're not looking to me, but they're looking at me and seeing the mission. That I'm just part of that call. Like Paul was saying to the people, he says, follow me as I follow Christ. If you want to make me the point man, I need you to understand that all I'm doing is following Jesus. You know what Jesus told everybody? I'm just doing what the Father's told me to do. So if you look at me, you're seeing the Father because I'm basically doing the same thing He's doing. And when people look to us, we got to say, follow me because I'm following Christ. And if they'll follow you, they'll find Him. You remember the story when Jesus was talking to the woman at the well? They're sitting around and he begins to explain to her. She's talking about, well, he said, go get your husband. She's like, well, I don't have a husband because I know you've had 5 husbands and the man that you're with now is not one of those. She said, I perceive you are a prophet. I think you know something. You must have heard from God. He said, I am God. Go back and tell them that they can come and drink from the water that I have and have eternal life. She went back and it says the whole town came out. They said, we believe because you told this woman everything that she did, but now we believe because of what you've said. Do you understand that we're the woman at the well in that picture, in that story? So many times when we read that story, we put ourselves in David's shoes, in David and Goliath. We put ourselves in Jesus' shoe at the woman in the woman in the well. No. We're Israelites. Jesus is David. Jesus is Jesus, and we're the woman at the well. We got to quit looking at these stories like we're the hero. We're not the hero. Jesus is the hero. But she went back and she told them about Jesus, and it says that we came with what she said, but now we believe because of what you said. That's our job. When we got saved, we're the woman at the well. That was us. Some of us were worse than her. But God saved us. He set us free. And we have something to give people. The last thing is this. So first, again, is extreme ownership. 2 is there's no bad teams, just bad leaders. Number 3 is we believe in the mission. And number 4 here, I printed it on front and back, got me confused there for a second. Number 4 is your ego has to go. Right? If we'll take extreme ownership and we'll begin to believe in the mission and we'll begin to take our ego and remove it from its place, God's going to begin to do something great. Everything else we talk about after this is just going to go. It's just going to help us. It's just going to build on what we're talking about right now. Max Lucado said this, a man who wants to lead the orchestra must turn his back on the crowd. Love it. It's not about being famous. It's not about you being the most important person in the room. It's about Jesus. Your ego has to go. Me and Brother Bell was at something the other day, and a man said this, your sermon towel has to be bigger than your ego. I'm like, man, that was a great point. I knew I was preaching this. I pulled out my phone right then and just stuck it right there in that note, in that spot. Your serving tower has to be bigger than your ego. Jesus got up from the table and he took off his outer robe and he put a towel around his waist and he got down and washed feet and which a servant would do. He's God. If anybody deserves an ego, it's God. Who are you talking to? I created you, you know? Kind of like he did with Job, but he really wasn't being as mean as sometimes we think. He takes it off and he takes the place of a servant because the servant towel is bigger than his ego. And he says, you want to be great? You got to be just like me. And he was doing a slave's job. That'll preach all day. Take that home and say, I need to be doing a slave's job. Paul said, I'm a slave to righteousness. I've made myself a bondservant. I quit my former life to become a slave for righteousness. The ego has to go. Ego clouds and disrupts everything. The planning process, the ability to take good advice, the ability to take constructive criticism. If you can't take constructive criticism, every time somebody says something about the work that you do, you go, and you got something, I got somewhere else to be and somewhere else to do and somewhere else to go. Sometimes somebody has a good point and we need to listen to it. You're like, yeah, but not that guy. Keeps telling me the same thing all the time. Well, that guy may not be the guy, all right? He may need to shut up. But if you can't take constructive criticism, it's because your ego's too big. It's one thing I've always liked that I've seen people do. People that I remember hearing a story where Jensen Franklin was up there and he preached, and some guy came down and he called him out. Not bad. He just said, that's not really in the context that it was supposed to be in. If you know Jensen Franklin, he does that every now and then. Right? It's not a bad thing. He just he'll tell you a great story to be powerful, but I'm like, that's not exactly how that is. The story's not wrong. It just, that point wasn't meant to be that way. And Jensen said, okay. And he said, let me explain to you. And he said something. And the guy, instead of just going, well, okay, you know, and going on, he listened to the guy. And the guy began to explain to him that it was even greater than what he thought it was. Jensen said, man, you're right. And there was an altar call still going. Jensen got up and he said, you know what? I totally fumbled how that went. I totally messed that up. Some guy, he just talked to me. He goes, and then he began to explain to him the real reason. And they had another altar call and twice as many people came down. You know why? He was able to go, you know what? I made a mistake. And it's even better than I thought it was. God's word in the correct context was better than I ever thought what I was even preaching. But that had to be humility to stand up there and say, I messed up. That was actually not right. This is right. That's a hard thing to do. Brother Bell, when he said he started preaching, he's out there and there's a couple of preachers sitting out in the sanctuary, you know, when he was preaching his first message. And he said he preached what he was going to preach that morning and that night, all that morning service, twice. Did you go twice or did you just go through both of the messages? And he said, and there's that guy out there who's a preacher. You know, I mean, maybe it was two. Was it two of them? All four of them was preachers, and here he is. He's preaching his message, and he said, in 10 minutes, I was done. And the great news is, you know what? That's how they started, too. That's how it works. He said, man, we might have an awesome altar call now. We get out, and we can still beat the Baptist church to the buffet dinner. Yeah, that's right. We went to Grandma's house, didn't we? I love this thought that the ego has to go. And I'm always been open to constructive criticism. Listen, if you're going to say something to me that goes against what God says, I may look at you and smile and take it in. But if God's told me something that's about myself that's greater, I'm going to go with that. If you tell me this church is going to be under Ichabod, a curse, I'll say, yeah, I'll rebuke that in Jesus' name. Get out of my face. I know what God's going to do. I don't care about all that. But if somebody wants to tell me, listen, man, You keep saying man or dude or whoa or smoking crack or something way too much in your sermons, I'll listen. I'll understand that. Me and Ed, we talk all the time. Ed goes, man, there's one time you said the same. He said, man, isn't that crazy? Like 12 times in that one sermon, you know? And I'm like, yeah, it's crazy. And we've done some things where we talked about it and we go back and listen to ourselves after you preach and you're like, it's terrible. You ever heard yourself sing? You know, you're like, I thought I was good. And then I heard myself on a recording like, man, I wish I had a studio cut in that. I've been up here in the front row and I think they're about to do it like Hillsong does it, but they change and go the opposite direction. I'm like, whoa. The people next to me are looking at me like, yo, it's embarrassing. I felt like I was in the car in the shower for a minute. I could just build it out. You've been there, right? It's okay to take constructive criticism. It's okay to be able to say, you know what? I don't always get things right. If we can get that ego out of the way, God can begin to do some things with us. Because when personal agendas become more important than the team, okay, the mission begins to falter and the procedures begin to break down and suffer and failure ensues. Failure begins to happen at that point. An ego can prevent a leader from conducting honest and realistic, evaluation of themselves. Have you ever done this before? Start thinking about, well, how did I do? And you can think of all the bad things that you've done. But I just want to put those on the back burner for a minute. Let's just dwell on the good things that I've done. And I get that sometimes. But to avoid and to deny and not to listen on how you can get better, it doesn't help anybody. It begins to hurt everybody. So in the next couple of weeks, as we're talking about parenting, we're talking about finances, I'm not going to do it because I'm trying to beat you down. If it helps you, use it. Take something. Get a nugget. Let something stick in your mind. Let a quote hit you. Let a point hit you. Let yourself go home tonight and go, I've got to live in extreme ownership. This was tough for me. I listened to this book, and every single day after that, I was going, man, I stink. I'm terrible at life. Because I begin to pay attention to everything. I was like, I go to blame somebody. I'm like, it was me. That's a hard thing, right? When you point at somebody, you got three fingers pointing back at you. Yeah, that was me. And maybe these things can teach you and grab a hold of you. And maybe you come to that point where you just take up your cross. To yourself and to your plans and your wishes, and you start going, God, you have a great point. Your mission is still great. Your plan is still the best. Your economy is still the best. Your heart is still the best. Your grace is the best. Your love is the best. And I've been trying to put my best foot forward, and it hasn't been yours. It's been mine. I want to do what you want to do. Because sometimes success may be your problem. That you've been so good at winning that when something goes wrong, it had to be somebody else's fault because I don't get things wrong. I don't say the wrong thing. I don't do the wrong things. The fact that you don't make many mistakes. Because when you do, you're always looking for someone else to blame. One of the great thoughts Max Lucado always gives, he goes, the problem with successful people is success. I went, wow, so true. He goes, because they don't think they can grow anymore. They think they've got it all figured out. I heard T.D. Jakes said, when you're the smartest guy in your circle, you need a bigger circle. He goes, now no one's helping you grow. You're only leading people. and you're not being led yourself. I went, We've got to step aside and let the ego get out of the way. Be willing to listen and willing to die. Own it. Believe. Put your ego aside and you'll be a good leader. And I'm going to end on this quote. John Maxwell says, a leader is one who knows the way, who goes the way, and who shows the way. Jesus told us this, I am the way. Let's pray. God, right now, you are a great God speaking to us. Lord, I pray that